Old money is generational wealth. Not money someone made, money that has been quietly accumulating and passing down through a family line for decades, sometimes centuries. The defining feature of old money is not the amount, it is the culture built around it. Families with old money tend to view wealth not as something to display, but as something to protect. The goal is always the same: preserve what you have, grow it modestly, and pass on more than you received. Repeat that across enough generations, and the numbers become difficult to comprehend.
Old money does not look like money. That is the point. The clothes are understated. The cars are sensible. The house might be enormous, but it has been in the family for generations, rather than purchased last year. There are no announcements. Old money families have been rich long enough to stop finding it interesting. What they invest in reflects their priorities. Land, because it cannot be manufactured. Fine art and private collections. Top-tier education for every generation. And long-established businesses with durable cash flows. Not exciting. Extremely effective over long periods.
New money is wealth created within a single lifetime. The person earning it started with nothing and built something: a business, a career, a skill that the market decided to pay very well. This is now the dominant form of wealth globally. The majority of the world's wealthiest individuals are self-made. Old money dynasties still exist, but they are increasingly outnumbered by people who started with an idea or a work ethic and turned it into a fortune.
New money tends to look different from old money. The wealth is newer, and for many people experiencing financial freedom for the first time in their family history, the natural impulse is to make it visible. The house, the car, the holidays, these are not just purchases. They are proof of something that felt impossible not long ago. There is nothing wrong with that. The gap in behavior between new and old money is less about character and more about context. Old money is used to wealth. New money is still getting acquainted with it. The tech rich are a specific and relatively recent category. These are the founders, engineers, and early employees of technology companies that grew fast enough to create wealth on a scale that previous generations had no framework for. What makes technology wealth different from most other forms is the speed and the leverage. A software product can be built once and sold to millions simultaneously. There is no factory to build, no inventory to manage, no physical constraints on how large it can get. The right product in the right moment can compound from nothing to billions in a handful of years.
The interesting contradiction of the tech rich is how they present themselves. Some of the wealthiest people produced by the technology industry are among the least visibly wealthy people you would encounter. Plain clothes, modest routines, a focus on work rather than lifestyle. The wealth is often almost an afterthought, a byproduct of building something they found genuinely interesting. That is not universally true, but it is common enough to be a recognizable pattern. Real estate wealth is old. It predates stocks, bonds, cryptocurrency, and every other modern financial instrument, and it has been producing rich people consistently throughout all of them. The core principle is simple. Land is finite. You cannot create more of it. As populations grow and demand for space increases, the value of well-positioned property tends to rise. Buy the right thing in the right place, hold it long enough, and the math works in your favor almost by default.
What separates the genuinely real estate rich from people who simply own a property or two is compounding. They used the equity in the first property to acquire a second, then a third, each one generating income, each one appreciating, each one providing the collateral to grow further. Patience is the defining characteristic of this type. They do not think in months. They think in decades. Real estate consistently appears among the top industries represented in global wealth rankings, and it has done so through every economic cycle, technological disruption, and financial crisis in modern history. there is a reason for that. Celebrity wealth arrives differently from most other types. It does not accumulate gradually. It tends to arrive in concentrated bursts. A film that becomes a global phenomenon, a song that goes everywhere simultaneously, a moment of cultural relevance that suddenly makes a name worth a great deal of money. The challenge with celebrity wealth is that income and fame are tied together, and both have a shelf life. The question every genuinely wealthy celebrity had to answer was what to do with the platform before the platform started shrinking. The ones who built lasting wealth understood that fame is not the destination. It is the starting capital. A large audience is an asset, and assets can be deployed. The celebrities who moved from entertainment into ownership of brands, businesses, media companies, and equity stakes are the ones who stayed rich after the initial wave of fame passed. The ones who treated celebrity income like a permanent condition rather than a window of opportunity tend to end up with a very different financial story. Athletic wealth has a structural problem that most other types of wealth do not. The career is short. A decade of peak performance is typical. Some manage less. The earning window is narrow. The physical demands are extreme, and the transition out is rarely gradual. It tends to stop quite suddenly. This creates a pressure that most professions never generate. The athlete who understands their situation early enough treats their playing career as a salary, a high one for a limited time, and uses it to build something that will still be generating returns long after the contract ends. The athletes who leave their careers wealthy are almost always the ones who thought about business while they were still competing. Endorsement deals reinvested into equity, brand relationships that led to ownership stakes, media, production, food, technology. The categories vary, but the structure is the same. Use the visibility the sport provides to build something independent of it. The sports career ends, the business continues. The investor rich never manufactured anything, never launched a product, never built a team. What they did was identify value earlier than most people, allocate capital toward it, and wait. That sounds straightforward. In practice, it requires a specific kind of discipline that very few people actually have. The ability to buy when sentiment is negative. The patience to hold when short-term pressure suggests selling. The conviction to remain in a position long enough for the thesis to play out, sometimes over many years, in the face of everyone around you disagreeing. Investor wealth is also perhaps the most counterintuitive type to observe from the outside. In the early stages, it is almost completely invisible. There is nothing to see. No business, no product, no employees. Just positions in financial instruments, quietly compounding. Then, at some point, the numbers become impossible to ignore, and a person who appeared to be doing very little is revealed to have been doing the most important thing possible, letting time and compounding do the work that most people try to replace with activity. Cryptocurrency created a new category of wealthy person that did not exist before. Someone who got rich not by building a company or managing a portfolio, but by recognizing something new, tolerating the uncertainty, and holding long enough for the market to agree with their assessment. The defining characteristic of crypto wealth is its relationship with time. Fortunes that took traditional investors decades to accumulate were sometimes built in a few years. That speed attracted an enormous amount of attention, and an enormous amount of people who arrived too late, paid too much, and held too long into a decline. What separates the genuinely crypto-rich from the many who attempted it and failed is usually a combination of timing, conviction, and the ability to resist selling during periods of extreme volatility. Prices that dropped by 70 or 80% were not unusual in any given cycle. Most people cannot hold through that. The ones who did, and who entered early enough, ended up with returns that no other asset class was producing. The ones who entered at the peak and panicked at the bottom had the opposite experience.
The inheritor is different from someone who grew up in a multi-generational wealth dynasty. They received wealth, perhaps from a parent, perhaps from a relative, as a single transfer event, rather than as an environment they were raised in. That distinction matters because growing up surrounded by wealth builds habits, knowledge, and infrastructure around managing it. Receiving a large sum as an adult does not automatically come with any of those things. The money arrives, the skills to manage it do not. Research consistently shows that a significant portion of people who receive large, unexpected financial transfers lose most of it within a short period. Not through recklessness necessarily, though that happens, but through a lack of framework. Decisions made without sufficient knowledge, lifestyle adjustments that outpace the underlying asset base, and the simple failure to understand that managing wealth is a learned skill rather than an instinct. The inheritors who keep and grow what they receive are typically the ones who immediately recognize the gap between having money and knowing what to do with it, and went and learned the difference. The quiet rich are the most surprising type on this list, and probably the most common type you will actually encounter in real life without realizing it. These are the people whose lifestyle gives nothing away. The car is practical. The house is normal. The clothes are unremarkable. They do not talk about money. They do not display money. They are indistinguishable in most social contexts from people on a fraction of their actual net worth. What they did, quietly, consistently, over a very long time, was save and invest. Not dramatically, not with one big bet that paid off, just regular contributions to investment accounts compounded over 30 or 40 years, with the discipline to never pull it out when the market got uncomfortable. Research into the habits of ordinary millionaires, people with seven-figure net worth who were not famous, did not inherit it, and did not found a company, consistently finds the same profile: long time horizons, consistent behavior, extremely low lifestyle inflation, no dramatic wealth events, just the mathematics of compounding, applied patiently and without interruption.